Hey everybody, this is Cyrus, still here, still alive, and today we're talking about James Randi, who passed away this week, and some ramifications of that, a few thoughts, and hope you liked the video. Before we begin, I probably have a few updates related to my own health. I'm going to put those in at the end of this video, so if you don't want to listen to that, you don't have to. And yeah, so hope everyone's doing well. Let's get into it. So James Randi, of course, was the predominant skeptic who had waged a multi-decades long crusade against anything and everything that he considered to be paranormal. A long time ago, I corresponded with James Randi in an email, and I forget exactly what the details of that email were, but in essence, it was me being quite young, quite naive, and I was reacting to something he had written. I don't remember the details of it, but my question for him was, do you really think you're going to change minds with a very hostile attitude? What if you allowed the other side to present their case, and then you presented your case, and then you allowed people to decide for themselves whether the supernatural subjects are real or not? And then Randi replied to me, that would basically be surrendering and allowing all the yahoos to take over. Never. So obviously, this is a guy who was very flawed in his personality, but also, the essence of what he was doing for so long was pathological, and like many professional skeptics, it almost didn't matter if there was evidence or truth or anything behind the subjects that he deemed unfit for study. His job was to be a censor. His job was to prevent anything from passing through the gates of James Randi, and this had been the sword and shield that so many of his followers have used for so many years, ever since I was a youngin' on the internet way back. That's always been the default argument that people make. It's like, well, obviously UFOs are not real because the UFOs would have won the Randi $1 Million Challenge, or whatever absurd thing is, whatever absurd way to fit the argument around the $1 million stuff. And there's so many resources that I could reference about how flawed Randi's $1 Million Challenge was, the least of which being books like Randi's Prize. I think that was Craig Weiler, I think. There's also excellent resources over at White Crow Books. There's quite a few different books and articles, also by Dean Radin, that relate to the fallacy of the Randi Prize and how quite ridiculous it is that people still cite that as some kind of evidence that, quote, paranormal things don't exist. So I want to now turn a little bit towards Randi personally, because the question on some people's minds is those of us who are involved in life after death research, afterlife studies, whatever you want to call this area of work, is that where would somebody like Randi be now? Given that we've researched and are aware of an afterlife dimension that is quite, of course, quite an all-encompassing topic, which is all, among many of the subjects that we talk about here at Afterlife Topics. But given that expansive and complicated subject, and where would somebody like Randi fit into it? Where would somebody fit in who suffers from this pathological denial of higher dimensional realities? So is it like the Rob Schwartzes say, that it doesn't matter who you are, you immediately elevate into like an all knowledgeable being of light, free of imperfections and flaws, and of a divine deity-like level of consciousness? Or is it more like first-hand experiencers say, that we more or less stay ourselves, and so our conditions on that side is going to reflect our personal psyche? Of course, those of you who watch this channel know which of those positions I take, and so we're going to explore the latter position based upon some words by Jurgen Ziva over on the Afterlife Research Education Forum his thoughts about James Randi, because I think it's very enlightening. Before we go into what the great out-of-body explorer Jurgen Ziva has to say about this, you're watching Afterlife Topics. Your help is always appreciated, so that includes hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and if you want to get involved more or work with me personally, unlimited coaching, you can sign up as a patron for Afterlife University, where we try to meet twice a week when I'm not terribly sick anyway, when at least when I'm able to meet. And then we have discussions, and we have guest interviews sometimes, and all of that. So that's over at afterlifetopics.com/university. Or for a smaller amount, you can hang out with me over at the Patreon, patreon.com/afterlifetopics. I appreciate all you guys out there helping keep this stuff going. Okay, so to continue. Here is what Jurgen had to say about the situation of James Randi passing away. So first, this is a response to Mikhail Kush. And Mikhail asks, Jurgen, how is it that someone cannot realize that they're dead? The environment may appear to be unchanged, but if they go home and encounter living friends and acquaintances, those people will seem to ignore them. There must be other obvious clues, other critical thinking processes in our physical brain that gave humans a survival edge here on Earth. Let's call it left brain thinking, just not as sharp on the other side. Or is the imaginative power to delude ourselves and deny what we don't want to see stronger over there? Actually, Mikhail, I think, makes some really good points as well. I definitely think that there is a possibility of self-delusion in realms beyond, in the so-called non-physical, I would say less physical worlds that are so influenced by the mind. But Jurgen makes a really good point in this little essay that he writes in response. Hi, Mikhail. This is a really good question for people who know nothing about life after death and believe when they die there is nothing at all, but are then faced with a reality which appears to be very physical and just as real. They may not consider the possibility of their own death at all. Reality awareness is clear, if not enhanced, when in OBE, and it is hard to tell the difference. I still use the quote hover test during OBEs to make sure I am not making a fool of myself in the physical world. Many others do too. I've been in that situation myself when I'm in a very lucid out-of-body state, like in my own house, and the thought crosses my mind, I might have just been like semi-asleep and I got out of bed and I think I'm out of my body. I've also been paranoid when I've like spied on people in the out-of-body state, because I realize, what if I'm actually just being a creep and I'm not out of my body? So so that's a real thing. Then if you consider some materialist skeptics living in denial, they may opt for any other explanation for their own predicament rather than their own death. Things are even more skewed when you consider that their physical conditioning in terms of linear cognition no longer applies as before, and yet everything makes sense, even absurdities, just as it does in a dream where pigs can fly and the dreamer does not question it. So that's an interesting point. So let's see. So I'll read it again. Things are even more skewed when you consider that their physical conditioning in terms of linear cognition no longer applies as before, and yet everything makes sense, even absurdities, just as it does in a dream. So there is an interesting point there. That on that side, I do think that there can be things occurring on that side that only in retrospect that we think of as being absurd, but it is just a normal way of things on that higher dimensional spectrum. So another interesting point. But anyway, let's continue. The majority of people have very little awareness. That is why lucid dreaming teachers teach people to conduct reality checks, to become aware during the day so that they carry this critical faculty over into the dream, where awareness gives them control and allows them to recognize a dream and thereby become lucid. If people like Randi and others die who live in their materialist dream world, they have a much more difficult time to make sense and are easily cajoled into accepting that they are still alive. They find it easier to accept their new state the way they find it rather than questioning it, just as dreamers do. The dead people are simply dreamers. All people who communicate with mediums are people who are aware of their state. Many others learn and adapt, some sooner, some over time. A fair number of people consider their past life on Earth as little more than a dream. They usually carry on with their old ways and habits, plodding along and learning very slowly. I can count a number of occasions where dead people were still mystified about their status when I chatted to them. Some didn't even know there were other states beyond theirs they lived on. In Vistas of Infinity, I mentioned a husband of a friend of my wife who had died of cancer. He had been dead for some time, and when I talked to him during an OBE, he was simply letting me know that he was making a gradual recovery from his cancer. He had no idea that he was dead. So in essence, where would somebody like Randi be? He could be in that category of the guy that Jurgen references at the end of this article. Somebody who, essentially believing that, accepting, I should say, the world around him at face value, even things that we might find to be out of this world or crazy. There's like this kind of cognitive thing that happens where people on that side are just like, yeah, there's a pig flying around. They just accept it as normal suddenly and know that there's been a little bit of a change, but they don't accept that they've actually died because they were too rooted in this world and in materialist thinking to consider a possibility like that. So Randi, at the ripe age of 457 when he finally died, may unfortunately continue to be age 457 in the afterlife because, in his opinion, life continues as normal. Maybe he's suffering a bit of dementia because maybe he's in a new environment or the house looks different and he may be wondering where his partner is and things of that nature. But it's unlikely somebody like Randi, who now becomes a card-carrying resident of the astral world, is going to just accept he's dead. He's probably going to get suspicious in about 20 years when it's like I'm celebrating my I don't know how I think maybe he was really like 90 or something. So when he's pushing toward 110 years old, 120 years old, he might begin to think it's awfully weird that I'm living to such an old age, but I sure am healthy. And it goes to show you I'm doing something right because I feel pretty good and I'm pushing 120 years old. But it is a sad situation when people end up like this, and it's a sad situation if that's how James Randi is now. Guess that's almost all we can do is speculate about that. And I will not, I do not recommend immediately believing any channeler or medium who claims that they're summoning Randi, because my opinion is most likely this is the situation he's in. And so if somebody, some I don't know, popular YouTube medium comes along and immediately says like, Randi is here, he is a being of light, I mean, he is all-knowing, all-intelligent, made of love, and he apologizes for his doubting of Sylvia Brown and blah blah blah, I truly doubt that this will be accurate, because in a situation like this, as Jurgen states, most the deceased who come through mediums recognize that they've passed on. If someone does not recognize they've passed on, they're not likely to be getting picked up by Channeling Eric or any other group like that. All right, well, I think that's it really. I don't want to beat the dead horse here. We know this is the situation with Randi. We knew he was going to pass away pretty soon because, again, the guy was super old, and when your life force consists of pure, unadulterated hatred flowing through your veins, I'm surprised anyone can last as long as he did, but that seemed to be what was keeping him going, and now it's time for him to move on, and hopefully he snaps out of that condition. But spurred by such arrogance, who knows? Alright, thanks for watching this video. You can get involved, grab some books of mine like Understanding Life After Death or The Afterlife and Beyond over on Amazon, or get involved in the Facebook group, of course. So health updates, which may be useful also to people suffering from my same issues, which is quite a few people in the world today. And a special shout out to some of you guys who still harass me and claim that the COVID virus is not real, and I'm working for the government by saying that I've been suffering from it for so long. There's groups on Facebook with 100,000 members in each group of people suffering, from the long-term effects of this virus. And so it is a real thing, and I'm on month number 7. So my symptoms took a radical change 5 or 6 days ago when I began feeling the virus entering into my olfactory nerve. That is the part of your brain that regulates smelling, scent and smell. Scent and taste. And I woke up and after having basically feeling like crap and literally feeling this thing moving around my brain, and then the whole world smelled like a chemical fire. So my sense of smell completely destroyed. All these foods that I'm used to tasted like garbage. Literally, milk tasted awful. I tried to take a sip, and obviously I was very very panicked and in a kind of state of semi emotional breakdown that day. And then the next day, well, that night I got like no sleep. 1 hour, 2 hours of sleep. The next night, no sleep. The next night, no sleep. So for several days, I was on maximum 2 hours of sleep a night. Although that massive scent and taste disruption kind of went away, and now it only comes back in flare-ups, like when it's attacking this part of the brain again, and then I get the scent and taste, the scent and taste disruption. That happens again. So, here's the interesting thing is that during these days though, like I feel like my whole brain has been like messed with. Like I'm jittery, I'm having like weird twitching sensations and all this weird stuff happening to me. But every single night, sleeping 1, 2, 3 hours, it was all astral projection, transcendental, crazy psychedelic experiences the whole time. So something was being altered in my brain, causing that. And then the next day, instead of having the usual fatigue that I feel that's been just killing me for months, replacing the fatigue has been like an unusual energy. Now I'm also getting my stomach's being messed with, so I get bouts of nausea that can last hours, and that's horrible. But something changed when the sickness moved to this new part of my body, and it's almost like I can I don't even have to sleep. I'm all energized. Is my body producing too much adrenaline? Is it producing DMT? I don't know, but it's happening to a bunch of other people I'm talking to, and other friends of mine suffering from this same illness. That they get to this point and they have all this weird energy, and like it's like they don't have to sleep. One friend of mine says that she'll sleep for 2 or 3 hours and then work a 14-hour day and feel great. So this is like this weird other flip side of this disease. And there's even some people on the spiritual side of things giving out these theories and saying, well, this is the pandemic, the virus is actually upgrading our DNA, and this is the part where you begin feeling the upgrades. This is where you get the payoff. I'd love to be optimistic. I'd love to believe all of that, but I don't really believe it. Not completely. I think there could be something to that, and I really, really, really hope those guys are true, because I would love if I'm having all these awful symptoms this week, and then it leads into me finally getting better, and then like having new energy and feeling great. That would be amazing. But if there's anything that this sickness likes to do, it's crushing hopes. So I can't attach to that. I just have to basically survive one day at a time, and I'm still here, and I'm still conscious, and I can breathe, and so that's what matters. And again, we'll just take it one day at a time. So the next part of this video I almost want to make into a separate video, because I was speaking to a very good medium about a kind of protocol that you can follow, a dietary protocol, and different things you can do to get through this sickness, this virus that seems to stay in the body for such a long time. And so I may make this into a new video for those of you who are suffering with this. Quite a few of you guys who I've talked to who are dealing with similar situations as me, and I am now following this protocol, and we'll see how well that works. So that's your health update, and thanks for watching and supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.